I can't believe I'm sharing this story, but I feel like I have to. It's been 2 years and the memories still haunt me. It all started innocently enough with an online classified ad. It was a cold and rainy evening and I had just moved to a new city. My apartment was still a mess of unpacked boxes and I was feeling a bit lonely. I had heard about Craigslist and decided to give it a try to find some furniture and maybe make a friend in the process. I logged onto the website and started browsing through the furniture listings. Most of them were standard: couches, tables, chairs. But one ad caught my eye. It was titled "Antique Mirror. Must go ASAP." The picture showed a beautiful ornate mirror that looked like it belonged in a Victorian mansion. The price was unbelievably low, and the seller claimed it needed to be gone that very night. Excited by the prospect of scoring such a great deal, I sent a message to the seller. Within minutes, I received a response from a woman named Margaret. She explained that her grandmother had passed away, and they were clearing out the old family home. The mirror was the last thing left, and they wanted it gone to make room for new memories. Margaret provided me with the address and insisted I come pick it up immediately. I was hesitant about going to a stranger's house so late at night, but the allure of the mirror was too strong. I decided to go, reasoning that it couldn't hurt to meet someone new. As I pulled up to the address Margaret had given me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The house was a dilapidated Victorian-era mansion, its paint peeling and the windows covered in dust and grime. I knocked on the door and it creaked open slowly, revealing Margaret, a frail elderly woman with a friendly smile. She led me through the house, the floorboards groaning with each step. The place was filled with antique furniture and dusty family portraits which seemed to watch my every move. Margaret took me to the mirror, which was even more beautiful up close. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with intricate carvings and a tarnished silver frame. Margaret explained that the mirror had been in her family for generations but had brought nothing but bad luck. She said her grandmother had claimed to see strange figures and hear voices when she looked into it. Margaret and her family had decided that it was best to part with it, and I, naively, agreed to take it off their hands. As we carried the mirror to my car, Margaret warned me to never look into it. She said it was cursed and had brought misery to her family. I laughed it off, thinking it was just an old superstition. I drove back to my apartment, excited about my new acquisition. I propped the mirror against the wall in the living room, feeling a strange thrill as I looked at my reflection in its aged glass. It was as if I had a connection to the past, to the generations of people who had gazed into it. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint whisper coming from the living room. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the voices grew louder and more distinct. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they sounded like a chorus of anguished souls. Terrified, I rushed into the living room, and there, in front of the mirror, I saw them. Figures, shadows, distorted faces staring back at me. They were moving, reaching out toward me, their mouths opening in silent screams. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, and the figures disappeared. For days, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whispers, felt their presence. I knew I had to get rid of the mirror, but it seemed to have a malevolent hold on me. I would find myself standing in front of it, unable to look away, feeling as though I was being drawn into its depths. One evening, as I stared into the mirror, I saw her. A woman with long, flowing hair and sad, empty eyes. She reached out to me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to touch her hand. As I did, I was pulled into the mirror, my world turning upside down. I found myself in a dark, shadowy realm, surrounded by the figures I had seen before. They moaned and wailed, their faces contorted in agony. I screamed, but no sound escaped my lips. I tried to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. As I wandered through that nightmarish landscape, I realized that I was not alone. Margaret was there too, her eyes filled with regret. She explained that the mirror was a portal to the afterlife, a place where the souls of the cursed were trapped for eternity. She had brought me here to take her place, to bear the burden of the mirror's curse. I pleaded with her to help me escape, but she simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I was left alone, surrounded by the tormented souls, forever trapped in the cursed mirror. And that's how I ended up here, writing this story from the other side. I can't warn you enough. Never trust a Craigslist ad that seems too good to be true, and never underestimate the power of a cursed mirror. My only hope is that by sharing my story, I can save others from the same fate. So if you ever come across an ad for an antique mirror that needs to go ASAP, just remember my story and run the other way. You never know what horrors might be lurking on the other side. Story 2. It all began with a late-night internet browsing session, as most strange and unsettling stories do. I was searching for a part-time job, something to help me cover my mounting bills while I struggled to finish my degree. That's when I stumbled upon a peculiar Craigslist ad that would lead me down a twisted path into the unknown. The ad's title read, "Historical Tour Guides Wanted. Uncover the Past. Earn Cash." It piqued my interest immediately. As an aspiring history major, I had always been drawn to the mysteries of the past. The ad promised flexible hours and above-average pay, which was exactly what I needed. I clicked on the ad and read the description. It stated that a local historical society was looking for tour guides to lead visitors through an old cemetery with a rich and mysterious history. The tours were to be conducted after dark, adding an allure to the experience. The pay offered was nearly too good to be true, and my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to send an email expressing my interest. Within hours, I received a reply from a man named Mr. Holloway, the coordinator of the Historical Society. He explained that they were in dire need of guides for the cemetery tours, especially with Halloween approaching. He scheduled an interview for the following evening at a cafe near the cemetery. The email concluded with an ominous message: "Prepare yourself for a journey into the past." The next evening, I found myself sipping coffee in the corner of the cafe, waiting for Mr. Holloway. He arrived promptly at 8 p.m., his tall, slender figure draped in a long black coat. His eyes were hidden behind wire-rimmed glasses, and his thin lips curled into a smile as he approached. "Good evening," he said, extending a bony hand. "I'm Mr. Holloway. You must be Alex." I shook his hand and introduced myself. He ordered a cup of black coffee and settled into the chair opposite mine. The cafe's patrons paid us no mind, engrossed in their own conversations. Mr. Holloway began by describing the history of the cemetery, an ancient and sprawling burial ground that had been in use for over 2 centuries. He spoke of the many notable figures interred there, from war heroes to influential politicians, and he emphasized the importance of preserving their stories. "Our goal," he explained, "is to offer a unique experience to our visitors, one that not only educates but also makes their veins freeze. We want our tours to be memorable, unforgettable." As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creep over me. The way he emphasized the word unforgettable sent a chill down my spine. I brushed it off as a simple case of nerves and continued to listen. Mr. Holloway detailed the responsibilities of the guides, which included memorizing historical facts, maintaining a respectful tone, and leading tours after dark. He explained that the darkness added an element of mystery to the experience, and that it was an essential part of the cemetery's allure. "The tours will be conducted at night, under the light of the moon and lanterns," he said. "It will be a true journey into the past, where the spirits of the past come alive." Spirits? The word hung in the air, unspoken but implied. I wondered if Mr. Holloway believed in ghosts, or if he was simply using the term metaphorically. After discussing logistics and pay, he handed me a black envelope, sealed with a wax stamp bearing the image of a skull. He instructed me to open it only when I was alone, as it contained sensitive information about the cemetery's history. As I left the cafe that night, the black envelope clutched in my hand. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It was a strange job interview, but the prospect of uncovering hidden stories from the past was too enticing to pass up. I waited until I was back in my apartment to open the black envelope. The wax seal cracked easily, revealing a single sheet of paper with detailed instructions for my first tour. It was scheduled for the upcoming Friday night, and the meeting point was the cemetery's entrance. I spent the next few days immersed in research, learning about the cemetery's history and its famous residents. It had a rich and colorful past, filled with stories of love, betrayal, and tragedy. I couldn't wait to share these tales with the tour group and to step into the role of a historical guide. Friday night arrived, and I donned a dark suit and tie, fitting attire for a cemetery tour. The moon hung low in the sky as I made my way to the cemetery's entrance. I was met by Mr. Holloway, who was dressed in his signature black coat. "Ah, Alex," he greeted me with a smile. "I see you're prepared. Our guests will be arriving shortly." As if on cue, a group of people began to gather at the entrance. They were a diverse bunch, ranging from college students to elderly couples, all eager for a taste of history. Mr. Holloway introduced me as their guide, and I began to lead the group into the cemetery, lantern in hand. The night was clear and crisp, the air filled with the scent of fallen leaves. I spoke with enthusiasm as I led the group through the gravestones, recounting the stories of those who rested there. The guests listened attentively, their eyes wide with fascination. As the tour progressed, I noticed that some of the group members were growing increasingly uneasy. They whispered to each other and cast furtive glances over their shoulders. I couldn't blame them. After all, a cemetery at night could be an eerie place. But as we reached a particular section of the cemetery, the unease escalated into full-blown fear. The guests began to murmur and shuffle nervously, their lanterns casting wavering shadows. I turned to Mr. Holloway, who was watching with an inscrutable expression. "What's going on?" I whispered to him. He leaned in close and spoke in a hushed tone. "This section of the cemetery has a dark history, one that we save for the climax of the tour. It's said to be haunted, you see. Some visitors claim to have seen apparitions and heard whispers in the dark." I glanced around, my nerves on edge. The atmosphere had indeed changed, and a weird stillness hung in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Just as I was about to continue the tour, a loud, unearthly shriek echoed through the cemetery. The guests screamed in terror, and I instinctively swung my lantern in the direction of the sound. What I saw froze me in my tracks. A figure, pale and ghostly, stood among the gravestones. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its mouth opened in a silent scream. The guests scattered, fleeing in all directions, leaving me and Mr. Holloway alone with the apparition. "What is that?" I stammered, my voice trembling. Mr. Holloway's expression remained unreadable as he stepped toward the figure. "It's a part of the tour, Alex. A special attraction, if you will." I watched in horror as the figure drew closer, its spectral form hovering in the moonlight. It reached out a transparent hand, and Mr. Holloway took it, leading the apparition away into the darkness. I stood there, my heart pounding, as the night returned to its usual silence. The guests had disappeared into the night, leaving me alone in the cemetery. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't shake the memory of that night. The apparition, the screams, Mr. Holloway's cryptic words, all of it haunted my thoughts. I tried to convince myself that it had been a staged event, a part of the tour meant to scare the guests, but something about it felt real, too real. I decided to confront Mr. Holloway to demand an explanation for what had happened. I sent him an email requesting a meeting, and he agreed to meet me at the same cafe where we had first discussed the job. When I arrived, Mr. Holloway was already there, sitting in the same corner. He greeted me with a smile, though there was a tension in the air. "Alex," he began, "I'm glad you reached out. I wanted to discuss that night with you." I wasted no time. "What was that thing, Mr. Holloway, the apparition in the cemetery? Was it real?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I suppose it's time for the truth." Mr. Holloway proceeded to reveal the dark history of the cemetery, a history that had been concealed from the public for years. He explained that the cemetery had been the site of a clandestine group known as the Society of the Silent, a secret society that had dabbled in the occult and conducted bizarre rituals in the dead of night. The apparition, he told me, was a result of those rituals. It was the spirit of a member of the society, a man who had been trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. The society's rituals had unleashed forces beyond their control, and the cemetery had become a place of malevolent energy. "We used the legend of the society and the apparition as a way to add an element of fear to the tours," Mr. Holloway admitted. "It's a way to make the experience unforgettable, just as I promised." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The history of the cemetery, the society, and the apparition, all of it was true. It was a shocking revelation, and it left me with more questions than answers. I continued to work as a tour guide for the Historical Society, sharing the stories of the cemetery's past with the guests. The knowledge that the apparition was real added an authenticity to the tours. and visitors left with a sense of having witnessed something truly otherworldly. But the revelation had changed something within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, that the society's secrets ran deeper than I had been told. I couldn't resist the urge to uncover the truth. One night after the tour had ended and the guests had left, I approached Mr. Holloway with a determined expression. "I want to know more," I said. "I want to learn about the society, about the rituals they performed, and about the apparition. Will you show me?" Mr. Holloway hesitated, his gaze fixed on mine. "You must understand, Alex, that delving further into this may lead to consequences you cannot fathom. The society's secrets are dangerous, and the apparition is a force beyond our control." I nodded, my curiosity outweighing my fear. "I'm willing to take that risk." Mr. Holloway sighed and led me to a hidden chamber beneath the cemetery, a crypt that had remained sealed for centuries. Inside, he revealed a collection of old tomes and artifacts, each bearing the mark of the Society of the Silent. As I delved into the Society's history, I learned of their obsession with unlocking the secrets of the afterlife. They had conducted forbidden rituals, made pacts with dark entities, and tampered with forces that should have remained untouched. It was a chilling account of a group consumed by their desire for knowledge and power. But what fascinated me most was the apparition itself. According to the Society's records, the spirit had been a member who had attempted to communicate with the dead. In a misguided experiment, they had opened a portal to the other side, allowing malevolent entities to enter our world. The apparition was the result of their doomed ritual, forever trapped between the realms. As I delved deeper into the Society's secrets, I felt a growing unease. The apparition's presence seemed to loom over me, as if it resented my intrusion into its dark history. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had awakened something malevolent. One night, as I conducted a tour through the cemetery, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The air grew heavy with tension, and the guests seemed to sense it too. I recounted the stories of the cemetery with a trembling voice, my lantern casting long shadows. As we reached the section of the cemetery where the apparition had first appeared, a chilling wind swept through the gravestones. The lanterns flickered, and the group grew silent, their eyes wide with fear. And then it happened. The apparition materialized before us, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It let out a blood-curdling scream, and the guests screamed in terror, fleeing in all directions. I stood frozen in place, unable to tear my gaze away from the spectral figure. It reached out a ghostly hand, and I felt a cold, numbing sensation envelop me. The world around me twisted and distorted, and I found myself standing in a shadowy realm, the apparition before me. It spoke, its voice a haunting whisper. "You have uncovered our secrets, Alex. You have trespassed where you should not have." I stammered, trying to find words, but fear had rendered me speechless. The apparition's eyes bore into mine, and I felt a surge of dread. "You must make a choice, Alex. You can choose to forget what you have learned, to leave this place and never return. Or you can choose to stay and become a part of our history, forever trapped between the realms." I had no choice but to agree, to erase the memories of the Society's secrets and the apparition from my mind. The apparition released its hold on me, and I found myself back in the cemetery, alone in the darkness. I returned to my apartment that night, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The memories of the Society's secrets had been erased, but the knowledge of what had transpired lingered like a shadow in my subconscious. I continued to work as a tour guide, but the apparition's presence haunted me. It watched from the shadows, a constant reminder of the choices I had made. The burden of the Society's secrets weighed heavily on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the cemetery. As the years passed, I struggled to move on with my life, haunted by the memories of that night. I knew that the apparition was always there, waiting in the darkness, a specter of the past that could never be forgotten. And so I share this story as a warning to those who seek to uncover the secrets of the past, to those who are drawn to the darkness that lurks beneath the surface. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, some secrets better left buried. For the apparition of the cemetery still watches, and its malevolent presence lingers, a reminder of the choices we make and the price we pay for our curiosity. Story 3. I had always been a skeptic when it came to online classified ads. Scammers, spammers, and worse lurked behind every deal too good to be true. But I was broke, desperate, and my college graduation was looming like a dark storm cloud, ready to rain on my dreams. That's how I found myself scouring Craigslist one evening for part-time work. The clock on my laptop read 3 a.m. as I stumbled upon an ad that seemed promising. Paid research opportunity, help needed urgently, it proclaimed. The headline was catchy, but the post itself was rather vague, mentioning only that a private research firm was willing to pay top dollar for participants in a series of experiments. The compensation promised was enough to pay off my mounting student loans and maybe even have some left over for celebration. With a mix of curiosity and desperation, I clicked on the ad, revealing an email address to contact for more details. I fired off an email, not expecting a response until the next day. However, within minutes, I received a reply from a sender named Researcher X. The email was concise and cryptic. Meet at the abandoned warehouse on 42nd Street at 11 p.m. tomorrow. Come alone. Wear black. I was skeptical, of course. The warning bells in my head clanged loudly. This was undoubtedly shady, maybe even dangerous. But I couldn't shake the idea that this could be the break I needed. I knew it was a risk, but I decided to go armed with the address, a pocket knife, and a smartphone that could dial 911 at a moment's notice. The day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. I tried to focus on my last few college classes, but my mind kept wandering to the mysterious ad. Who were these researchers, and what kind of experiments required secrecy and a midnight meeting at an abandoned warehouse? As evening fell, I donned a black hoodie and pants, wanting to blend into the shadows. I shoved the pocket knife into my back pocket and made my way to 42nd Street. The rain had begun to drizzle, and the city streets were dark and quiet. I felt like a character in a noir film, my heart pounding with every echoing step. The warehouse came into view, a towering, decrepit structure with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. The entrance was a rusted door ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. I hesitated for a moment, my fear trying to take control. But I had come this far. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior of the warehouse was even more ominous than the exterior. The only light came from a flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long dancing shadows across the grimy floor. The air was musty, filled with the scent of decay and dampness. I cautiously advanced further into the building. I could hear faint voices in the distance, echoing through the cavernous space. Following the sounds, I eventually stumbled upon a small room. A table stood in the center, surrounded by 4 chairs. Seated in one of them was a figure shrouded in darkness. "Take a seat," a voice said, low and raspy. I couldn't discern whether it was male or female. I hesitated for a moment before complying, sitting across from the mysterious figure. The dim light made it impossible to see their face. They pushed a folder toward me, and my trembling hands reached for it. "Inside, you'll find a document detailing the experiment," the voice continued. "You have the right to leave at any time. But once you read the document, you'll understand the importance of what we're doing here." With that, the figure fell silent, leaving me alone with the folder. I opened it slowly, my eyes scanning the typed pages. The document explained that this research was focused on fear and the human psyche. It outlined a series of tasks I would be required to complete, each designed to provoke fear in varying degrees. As I read further, I realized that this was no ordinary psychological experiment. The tasks included encounters with strangers in dark alleys, navigating through abandoned buildings, and even participating in staged accidents. The goal was to measure my physiological responses to fear-inducing scenarios and to assess my ability to remain calm under pressure. I should have left right then and there, but my curiosity and the promise of a substantial payment compelled me to stay. I signed the agreement at the end of the document, acknowledging the risks and agreeing to the terms of the experiment. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thrust into a series of increasingly unsettling situations. I was constantly under surveillance, my every move monitored by the researchers. They provided me with a smartphone and instructed me to document my experiences through video and voice recordings. The first task was relatively benign, a late-night walk through a park where I encountered a suspicious-looking stranger. I recorded the encounter as instructed, feeling a surge of fear as the stranger approached. only to be relieved when nothing untoward happened. But as the days passed, the experiments grew more sinister. I was sent to a derelict psychiatric hospital where I navigated dark, labyrinthine corridors and encountered remnants of its grim past. My heart raced as I heard distant whispers and faint cries that seemed to emanate from nowhere. Next, I was instructed to board a deserted subway car at the end of the line and ride it until I reached an unfamiliar station. The platform was empty, the station devoid of life, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My unease deepened as I noticed shadowy figures lurking in the tunnels, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. I recorded it all, my voice trembling as I narrated my experiences. But with each passing day, the fear grew harder to contain. The sleepless nights, the constant surveillance, and the uncertainty of what was real and what was part of the experiment began to take its toll on my sanity. Then came the night that would change everything. I received an email from Researcher X, containing an address and a single instruction. Visit this location alone. This is your final task. I had grown increasingly paranoid, and a sense of impending doom hung over me like a dark cloud. The address led me to an isolated, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The night was moonless, and the only light came from the pale glow of distant streetlights. I entered the warehouse, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Inside, the scene was unlike anything I had encountered before. The room was vast, with towering stacks of wooden crates, their contents hidden in the shadows. In the center of the room stood a single chair, and above it a solitary light bulb dangled from a frayed cord. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Something felt profoundly wrong about this situation. But the promise of payment, the desire to finally be free of this nightmare, pushed me forward. I took a seat beneath the swaying light bulb, and as if on cue, it flickered to life, casting a harsh, unnatural glow. From the shadows emerged a figure dressed in black, their face concealed beneath a hood. "You've done well," the figure said, their voice cold and emotionless. "But there's one final test we must conduct." The figure produced a small leather-bound book and placed it on the crate in front of me. It was old and weathered, its pages filled with faded text and illustrations of arcane symbols. "You must read from this book," the figure commanded. "Recite the words exactly as they are written, and your ordeal will be over." I glanced at the book, my unease growing. The symbols and text were like nothing I had ever seen, and a foreboding sense of dread washed over me. "What is this?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The figure leaned closer, their hooded face inches from mine. "It is your final test," they hissed. "Recite the words or remain trapped in this nightmare forever." I had no choice. Fear had brought me to this point, and fear would see me through to the end. I opened the book and began to read, my voice shaking as I spoke the incomprehensible words. As the last syllable left my lips, a deafening roar filled the room. The very air seemed to tremble, and the walls of the warehouse began to shake. I clung to the chair, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness, and the figure before me disappeared. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I activated its flashlight. The warehouse was empty, the chair and the book gone. I was alone, surrounded by the looming crates and the oppressive silence. I stumbled to my feet and made my way to the exit, my mind reeling. The experiments were over, but the fear remained, a festering seed of dread that had taken root in my soul. I returned to my apartment, the weight of what had transpired settling over me like a shroud. I never received the promised payment, and I never heard from researchers again. The entire experience remained shrouded in mystery, a nightmare from which I could never truly escape. To this day, I am haunted by the knowledge that I willingly subjected myself to those experiments, that I read from that accursed book. I can't help but wonder what I unleashed that night, what malevolent forces I unwittingly invoked. And as I write this, I can't shake the feeling that I am still being watched, that the shadows that once lurked in the corners of my vision are now closing in, ready to claim me once and for all. So if you ever come across a mysterious Craigslist ad promising quick cash for participating in a research study, heed my warning. Run the other way. Some fears are better left unexplored, some doors better left unopened, and some experiments better left untested.